You're different. That's why you've clicked this video review. You don't want an SUV just because of the way it looks. You're a practical person. You want a wagon. You want something that looks rugged, but has the all-wheel drive underpinnings that it should have for a vehicle like this. Yep, you're a Subaru Outback customer, and you want to find out if this all-new Outback, the 6th generation version, is as good as the previous one, which was already very good. And in this review, I'm going to tell you whether it is or not. Now, I'll pull over and show you around this 2021 Outback. In this review, I'll tell you everything you need to know about the all-new Subaru Outback. But if you're curious about something in particular, you can jump ahead. There are time codes on your screen now or in the YouTube timeline chapter markers below. If you are watching on YouTube, don't forget you'll find the link to the full written review at the CarsGuide site. It's in the description. But now it's time to take a closer look at the all-new Outback. Subaru Australia says customers wanted more high-tech and high-end stuff in the Outback, and the previous generation version, well, it's skewed towards the higher spec models. In this version, there's more stuff and more safety and more technology and a lot more of everything, including more price. Here's a rundown of the entire range. Opening the lineup is the Outback all-wheel drive, which still comes in under 40 grand and has lots of standard equipment such as LED lighting, 18-inch wheels, roof rails, cloth interior trim, a huge 11.6-inch tablet media screen with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and as you'd expect, plenty of safety technology. We'll cover that stuff off later. And above it is the Outback all-wheel drive Sport, which gets a different water-repellent interior trim, including front and rear outboard seat heating, a power tailgate, sat-nav, different roof rails and 18-inch wheels, and a black exterior styling pack. The car you see here is the all-wheel drive Touring. It's the most expensive model in the range, but still relatively well priced compared to 5-seat mid-sized SUVs. This one has a few more luxury items like Napa leather interior trim, an electric sunroof, a 9-speaker Harman Kardon stereo with CD player, a heated steering wheel, and a few other items besides. Be sure to read the full pricing and specs story at the CarsGuide site. You'll see it popping out at the top of your screen there if you're watching on YouTube. Next up, we're going to take a look at the design. Do you consider the Outback an SUV, or are you in camp high-riding wagon with me? Well, Subaru Australia describes it as a true blue, mud-in-its-blood all-wheel drive SUV. It looks more like a Forester now than ever before, if you ask me, but tell us what you think in the comments section below. The model you see here is the top-spec Touring variant, and it does have a few unique styling elements, but all models come with the same rough-and-tumble blackened bumpers with underbody protection, and all have LED lighting across the range. In profile, the Outback has a few interesting lines, including those squared-off wheel arch guards, which look, well, a bit more rugged than before. A bit more like an XV, you might think. The wheels are 18s across the range, but this top-spec model's rims are a bit too plain for me. At the back is where you might struggle to pick this as something other than a Forester. It gets very similar tail lights and bumper finishes, but is still a pretty nice looking back end, and it packs in plenty of practicality as well. Have you hit subscribe on our YouTube channel yet? And also make sure you tap the bell icon so you stay up to date with all of our latest video content. Next up, we're going to take a look inside the Outback. There's been a big change inside the cabin of the Outback, and it's right in front of you. It's the 11.6-inch media screen. It's a tablet-style portrait display, which does take a little bit of getting used to, but it's a really good, quick, and clean-looking screen. There's big icons, which makes it easier to find your way around the screen, and there are some hard buttons on the side and knobs for the volume and tuning as well, which just makes it a lot easier to interact with. Every model in the Outback range comes with this 11.6-inch screen, although you have to get the mid-spec or the top spec to get sat-nav included. This one is the top spec, remember, and it even gets a little CD player in here. Yep, CD players with 11.6-inch screens. Who would have thought that that world would have existed? But the design of this cabin is really smart. It's very clever, very comfortable, and very ergonomic. The steering wheel still has lots of buttons. Subaru hasn't swayed away from that idea. You do get used to that layout, although for some people it might be a little bit intimidating because there are so many options to choose from there. One thing I haven't enjoyed is the blinker stalk. Okay, so it turns on really fine, but I've found that it stays on longer than it should and end up going, oh, just turn off. There we go. Find that a lot in traffic, and that's a bit annoying, but otherwise there's some other nice touches. It seems like Subaru might have borrowed from Toyota's playbook here with a nice shelf in front of the passenger, which is good for storing a phone, and it's rubberized as well. There's two USB ports underneath the screen and a little storage caddy in there, but no wireless phone charging. There are deep cup holders between the seats. Now, let me just show you how deep they are. That's a medium or large coffee, and it means that it's just a little bit bigger than it needs to be. That might affect you if you order a large coffee whenever you go to the shop. There's bottle holders in the doors with trenches as well. They're not massive, but they're big enough, and the seat comfort is really good as well. All Outbacks have electric seat adjustment, and that's for the driver and the passenger, which is a nice touch. And in this spec, there's an electric sunroof as well, which is quite nice. Auto dimming rear view mirror, and of course you've got Subaru's excellent eyesight safety system up here. Tell you about that in a sec. And the sun visors actually fit a little better in this car than in cars with eyesight that, well, they were a little bit too small in a lot of cases, but now it seems that they've thought of that. Next, let's check out the back seat. The Subaru Outback is a little bigger than some of the mid-sized SUVs that it plays against on price, and that means that you get a very practical and spacious cabin. It is really a large wagon if you want to think of it that way. Plenty of room in here. This seat is set for me. I'm 182 centimeters or 6 foot tall, and look how much space I've got. Heaps. Lots of toe room, lots of knee room, and plenty of headroom as well. And this car has a lot of width to the cabin too, so you could fit 3 of me across. Thankfully, there aren't 3 of me, but if you have kids, there are ISOFIX child seat anchor points and 3 top tether points as well. Plus, those in the back will be happy with the fact that they've got directional air vents, plus there are 2 USB ports as well back here. And in this spec, the top spec, you get outboard seat heating as well. And that's a nice addition, especially if you frequent the snow, which a lot of Outback buyers do. And also in here, there are some nice map pockets, although I'm not so fond of the yellow foam backing on that. It looks a little bit cheap. There are bottle holders in the doors with little trenches. There's a flip down armrest with cup holders here as well. And these seats, as I'll show you in a sec, fold completely flat, which is really good, but there's also a nice level of recline to the seat back, and these seat belts, they don't get in the way when you fold the seats down, which is a really smart thing because this sort of car will probably have the seats folded down quite a bit. Don't believe what they tell you. This is a station wagon. It may be a high-riding one, but it gets the practicality of a wagon. As you can see, the CarsGuide luggage is already in here. There's 522 litres of capacity in this boot, which just means you can fit this amount of stuff, plus even more stuff, which means it's a really practical option for family buyers. And the top 2 specs get an electric tailgate as well. At the time of filming, we don't know the ANCAP crash test rating for the Outback, but here's a rundown of the safety equipment fitted. There's auto emergency braking with pedestrian and cyclist detection, as well as lane keeping assistance, lane departure warning, blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert, as well as auto high beam lights. All models have a driver monitor camera that will coach you to keep your eyes on the road, and there's a standard reversing camera, while the sport and touring models have front and side view cameras too. Speed sign recognition and adaptive cruise control are standard, and all models come with 8 airbags. Next, engine specs. All Subaru Outback models get a familiar 2.5 litre 4-cylinder petrol boxer engine. And if you're unaware what boxer means, it just means that the engine's horizontally opposed and it does have a bit of a different configuration to most 4-cylinder cars. But it means that you get that Subaru rumble, although not too much in the case of the Outback. This is a 90% new engine, and while it has more power and torque than before, it's not the really punchy turbo engine they get overseas. Of course, all Outbacks have all-wheel drive in their names, meaning they have the brand's symmetrical all-wheel drive setup, and like the old model, there's a continuously variable transmission, or CVT, doing the thinking for the engine. But unlike the existing Outback, the new one doesn't have a diesel engine option, and nor is there a 6-cylinder petrol. Towing capacity for the entire Outback range is 750 kilos for an unbraked trailer, or 2,000 kilos for a brake trailer. We suspect a hybrid may be offered at some point, and hopefully that turbo engine as well. You can find out what I think about how this engine behaves on the road if you skip ahead to the driving section, but next we're going to take a look at fuel consumption. Like I said, there's no hybrid and there's no diesel, but the official combined cycle fuel consumption for this 2.5 litre petrol, you'll see that on your screen now, that's decent. And here's what we've seen across a mix of real-world driving with this car. That's on your screen now. Next up, it's time to look at the ownership prospects of the Subaru Outback. Subaru doesn't go beyond expectations in terms of ownership with a 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty. That's par for the course now. And there's 1 year of roadside assist included. There's a 5-year cap price service plan, and you can prepay maintenance in 3 or 5 year blocks and roll that into your finance payments. It just means one less thing to budget for annually. Service intervals are 12 months or 12,500 kilometres, although it is a little bit more expensive to maintain than some of its rivals. If you want all that detail, hit that pop out at the top of your screen and you'll go to our written review of the entire 2021 Outback range, which has all of that nitty-gritty stuff, including all the prices for services. Next up, I'm going to show you what it's like to drive. If you've driven the previous generation Subaru Outback, this is not going to feel unfamiliar to you, nor if you've driven a Forester, because it's mighty similar to that as well. And that is to say that it's a very nice and easy car to drive. I really like it. It feels very competent, very comfortable, and very family friendly. And if that's what you're looking for, then this might be the right car for you. You might not even need to watch this more detailed breakdown of the drive experience. But for those who do want the nitty-gritty, here it comes. Let's talk about the engine first. It's a 2.5 litre boxer, as I mentioned before. It's a strong engine. It's not necessarily the most powerful or most enjoyable engine, but it has a little bit more power and torque than the previous version, and it's still got a Lineartronic CVT automatic transmission, which does a pretty good job of harnessing that power and torque, although some people still won't love the way that that CVT automatic behaves. For me, it's fine for this application. I think it suits it pretty well, and if you do need to put your foot down, it does pull you back in your seat. It is powerful enough, although not exciting, I would say. Under hard acceleration, there can be some engine noise to contend with because of that CVT automatic, but that's not too big of a deal. What about other parts of this drive experience then? Well, the steering is direct and has a nice amount of weight to it. Not the most feel through the wheel, but I think it's fine for this sort of vehicle. Not necessarily the most enjoyable car to drive, as I've said, but it's perfectly suited to a family buyer who just wants to get around without much fuss. And there is lane keeping assistance as well, which keeps you in your lane, and it does that without being too intrusive. Other safety systems include the driver monitoring system. There's a little camera up here on the dashboard that watches your face and just makes sure that your eyes aren't straying too far from the road. And if they are, it comes up with a warning saying, keep your eyes on the road. That's pretty neat. It can also do fatigue monitoring, obviously, as well. Plus, the visibility, because it's a Subaru, is excellent. I don't think I've driven a Subaru that doesn't have good visibility from the driver's seat. There's lots of glass, and when you look over your shoulder, you can easily see what's behind you when you're parking. For me, the suspension tune is just about perfect for this sort of application. It's not too soft, it's not too firm, and that means that it just handles itself nicely while still being comfortable enough. It's not trying to be a performance car, and we're thankful for that. In terms of noise, vibration, and harshness, there's not that much to complain about. It's a pretty quiet cabin. There's lots of sound insulation that's been added over the previous version of the Outback. And sure, you do get still a little bit of wind noise up around the mirrors and the tops of the doors at higher speeds, but generally, it's a pretty hushed place to be. Could be perfect for families with young kids. Is the all-new Subaru Outback more SUV than ever? Arguably, yes, it is. But the thing I love about it most is that it's still a high-riding wagon. And compared to some of those other mid-sized SUVs in a similar price bracket, it still offers a practicality advantage because of that. Tell us what you think in the comments section below, and also make sure you read the full detailed written review before you go judging us on the score of this new Outback range. And speaking of the score, here it is.